day everyone. So in this video, you will learn something. You will learn about the topic government peace treaties with Muslim Filipinos. But before that, let me introduce to you the group number 6. Government peace treaties with the Muslim Filipinos. The struggle for peace in Mindanao, the Philippines, was a great conflict. And to understand why this is such a big lift for peace, Mark Batak, who is the regional program coordinator, was being interviewed by IID, Initiatives for International Dialogue in the Philippines. IID has been involved in the peace process in Mindanao for almost 20 years. The southern Philippines has known a long history of armed conflict. Among those regions is Mindanao, where in February 2019, the Bangsamoro people voted to ratify the Bangsamoro Organic Law, BOL. This law is a big leap towards peace in the southern Philippines. To give us an overview of the conflict in Mindanao, how did the conflict come about, what are the root causes, the main actors, and what is it all about? So it involves struggle for the right to self-determination. So the people of Mindanao have this struggle mo na create ang conflict in Mindanao. A struggle that involves an assertion of their identity and demand for meaningful governance in the face of the national government failure to realize genuine social progress and peace and development in the southern Philippines. Also a response to historical injustices and grave human rights violations committed against the people of Mindanao. So, unsa man dining right to self-determination nga nahimong struggle sa people in Mindanao. So, the right to self-determination is the collective right of a people to determine its own future, free of any outside interference or coercion. It includes the right to determine this people's political status and to freely pursue its economic, social, spiritual, and cultural development. In the exercise of that right, people at one end can demand and pursue within the nation-state more political power, active participation in the decision-making and administration of government affairs, equitable redistribution of economic benefits, and appropriate ways of preserving and protecting their culture and way of life. On the other end, they have the right to organize their own sovereign and independent state with the right to international recognition. So what happened is, nag-struggle ang Mindanao sa right to self-determination because they don't have the right to speak up based sa akong nasabtan, and they don't have the power to speak up because of this failure of the government. The people in Mindanao just want to have involvement gani in the making process or sa pag-improve o pag-develop sa Mindanao, but it's sad to say nga the government was not able to listen sa ilang mga kasubo or sa ilang pong point ba sa mga taga Mindanao. So that's why na-create guro ang conflict. All people have the right to self-determination, right? By the virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. With the clamor to correct these historical injustices and to recognize their inherent right to chart their own political and cultural path, the Bangsamoro people, together with their non-Moro allies, have struggled to get their calls heard and acted upon by the central government. So the people in Mindanao was not being or not able to be heard by the government. And because of this, a huge number of the victims of the conflict in Mindanao have been ordinary civilians, women and men, young and old, who were either displaced from their communities or killed in the crossfire by bullets and bombs that recognize no gender, religion, creed, or stature. There are two opposing views when it comes to the armed struggle in the Bangsamoro region. So the first is, while the central government had earlier viewed the armed struggle as an act of rebellion against the state, so the other party believed that the struggle was all about the rebellions against the state, which is they believe that Mindanao people wants to rebel with that government, I guess. And the other party has always claimed it as a legitimate exercise of the right to self-determination. So the other party, which is for me the Mindanao people, just want to have this right to self-determination. The impact and the social cost of the decades-old war to the people and the entire nation have been vicious and costly. The infographics on the cost of war in Mindanao, which can be seen in the screen, explain previous Philippines governments. Huge spending on wars in Mindanao, which clearly talks about lives lost rather than lives improved. Finding peace solutions to the causes of the armed conflict in Mindanao is never easy, as the tool has affected not just Mindanao but the entire country. This has discouraged foreign and local investment and ultimately bleeding the nation coffers, with the previous government spending more on war than on basic social services. So as what we can see or we can hear, therefore we conclude that the conflicts really affect the country, not just the Mindanao, but the whole country gani. While previous governments tried to resolve these conflicts, the root cause is the failure to address the Mindanao's people's legitimate struggle for the right to self-determination, dignity, and governance, and is a major challenge to achieving sustainable peace in the region. The conflict between the government of the Philippines and the armed groups in Mindanao, particularly the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF), is not the only conflict affecting the whole region. The conflict in Mindanao is multifaceted, involving numerous armed groups, as well as clans, criminal gangs, and political elites. Main actors to this decades-old conflict are the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF), Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF), and other groups such as the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, the BIFF, Abu Sayyaf, which is considered a bandit group engaged in various criminal activities like kidnapping and bombing, as well as other armed non-state actors who are consistently in conflict with the central government. So therefore, daghan ang na-involve ani nga conflict, not just the government, but all the people in Mindanao, including the clans, the organization nga na mga gangs and violations. So that's why a lot yun of life ang na-lost because of this conflict.
The cost of war in Mindanao. The conflict in Mindanao is one of the biggest issues in the country, wherein most Muslims live in this place who want to fight for peaceful and progressive region, and this war has been marked in the country. The agreement of Bangsamoro Organic Law last January 25, 2019 was the latest procurement to attain peace in Mindanao. Bangsamoro people have the right of self-determination, which means right to achieve their political, cultural, and economic privilege. The BOL or Bangsamoro Organic Law was made to establish a new autonomous political entity in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region or BAR. This aims to bring peace by addressing the grievances, sentiments, and demands of Muslims. So what has civil society, particularly the initiatives for international dialogue, done for this peace-building process? So IID, or the Initiatives for International Dialogue, take a big part in building peace in Mindanao. As the war in Mindanao happened, IID's Moro and Mindanao helps to galvanize for the entire peace. Eventually, IID, together with its partner communities, were able to go through consensus building and lobbied in Congress a civil society agenda on crucial provisions in the draft BBL, conducted public advocacy activities, and engaged lawmakers and the media. GPPAC initiated and helped to establish networks for peace in the country. From the unending cycle, people witness savagery of armed conflict, and stepping forward of the BOL finally opens a smooth path towards peace, development, and social progress in Mindanao.
The peace process in Mindanao, the Philippines. The enactment of Bangsamoro Organic Law is a major step forward in achieving a just and sustainable peace in Mindanao. The Bangsamoro Organic Law, if implemented according to its intent and purpose, could finally open a smooth path towards peace, development, and social progress in the south of the Philippines. So are you hopeful that this change will be sustainable for a more peaceful Mindanao? In a historic move, President Rodrigo Duterte signed the Bangsamoro Organic Law on July 26, 2018, creating the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, home to minority Muslims fighting for self-determination in the predominantly Roman Catholic Philippines. The Bangsamoro Organic Law, now called the Organic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, is made to establish a new autonomous political entity in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. The war and conflict in Mindanao is one of the country's biggest issues that roots back with their disputes over ancestral land and religion. Many lives of Filipinos was unfortunately taken away during this war. The lives of ordinary civilians, such as women and men, young and old. But the change has come. Bangsamoro Organic Law is the latest procurement of the administration to attain peace in Mindanao and end their long-time struggle for independence. Here are the hopeful benefits of Bangsamoro Organic Law that will lead to a peaceful Mindanao. First is, Bangsamoro Organic Law aims to bring peace by addressing the grievances, sentiments, and demands of Muslims in the region. Then, the ratification of Bangsamoro Organic Law and the eventual establishment of the Bangsamoro government are significant political milestones towards realizing just peace and social progress not only for Mindanao but for the whole country. Muslims who mostly lived in Mindanao, Sulu, and Basilan have retained some or all of their own social, economic, cultural, and political beliefs and has the right to identify themselves by ascription or self-ascription. Lastly, Bangsamoro people will also have the right of self-determination, which is basically their collective right to achieve their own political, cultural, and economic privilege. But there are still difficult issues to be addressed around governance, inclusion, land distribution, incursion of foreign aid, dealing with shadow economies, and violent extremism in a fragile peace process. So what needs to be done now? The civil society has to develop what is now a post-conflict peace-building paradigm wherein we have to locate our role and added value during political transition around hard and intractable issues around land, governance, transitional justice, and security. Peace monitoring will continue to be a staple strategy fulfilling civil society role as a third party in the peace process. The civil society scorecard should be designed by critically monitor the following. First is realizing meaningful autonomy and right to self-rule of the Bangsamoro and the inhabitants of the region based on their distinct cultural identities, historical struggle, heritage, and traditions. Second, grant genuine and efficient fiscal autonomy for the Bangsamoro. Third, provide the Bangsamoro effective management and control over and benefits of the natural resources in the Bangsamoro territory. Fourth, full inclusion of the indigenous people rights is in the Bangsamoro governance to ensure the recognition and protection of their rights and to correct historical marginalization and inclusion. And lastly, realizing a transitional justice and reconciliation program for the Bangsamoro heed previous recommendations to establish a transitional justice and reconciliation commission for the Bangsamoro that shall, among others, ensure and promote justice, healing, and reconciliation.
Historical roots. In this part, you will learn the historical roots of Moro problem in Mindanao. It all started when Spain and America colonized the Philippines. History says that Islam had arrived in Sulu in the last quarter of the 13th century, earlier than Spanish period in 1565. Since the Spanish people was marked by bitter Spanish Moro Wars, the so-called Moro Wars fought in 6 stages spanning 4 centuries. After they got here in the Philippines, the colonialists called the Muslim natives as Moros, after their hated enemy, the Moors, who had previously ruled Spain for 8 centuries. Since Spaniards hated Moros, they fostered Christianized Indio to prejudice against Moros through such cultural institutions as the Moro-Moro play. During American period in 1903, Christian and Muslim Filipinos were by force of arms under a single government and sovereignty. So literally, Moros were forced by the American government to join wars. These are the summary of the historical roots of the Moro problem. First, the foreseeable or illegal annexation of Moro land to the Philippines under the Treaty of Paris in 1898. Second, military pacification. Third, imposition of confiscatory land laws. Fourth, Indianization of public administration in Moro land and the destruction of traditional political institutions. Fifth, government financed or induced land settlement and migration to Moro land. Sixth, land grabbing or conflicts. 7. Cultural inroads against the Moros. And the contemporary causes of the Moro problem are the Jabida massacre in 1968, Ilaga or Christian vigilant and military atrocities in 1970 or 1972, government neglect and inaction, Moro protest and grievances. And lastly, the triggering event of the contemporary Moro armed struggle was President Ferdinand E. Marcos' declaration of martial law on September 21, 1972. The Moro struggle. Armed groups representing the predominantly Muslim Moros have been struggling for greater autonomy from the Philippines government since the late 1960s. Although narratives of the Spanish and American colonial periods often overplay the extent of conflict between Islamic and Christian communities, Moro groups nevertheless share a strong sense of historic injustice. For many conflict-affected Moro communities, the state is perceived as politically and economically intrusive and predatory, embodying a religious and cultural majority bent on forced assimilation of Muslim minorities. Moro grievances focus in particular on Manila-sponsored internal colonization, including transmigration of large numbers of Christian Filipinos to the southern Philippines, settled on land originally belonging to Muslim and other indigenous communities.
A troubled peace process. The 1976 Tripoli Agreement between the government and the Moro National Liberation Front, or MNLF, was not properly implemented. This led to a new round of insurgency by the 12 to 15,000 strong MILF, which adopted a more overtly Islamic identity. A 2008 pact with Gloria Macapagal Arroyo administration focused on Moro rights to their traditional lands. This could have been an important breakthrough, but was struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Since 2012, the MILF had undertaken concerted and systematic efforts to engage with civil society actors in the peace process. The armed forces of the Philippines launched a major offensive against the MILF in 2008, displacing hundreds of thousands of civilians. The peace process has been in progress since 2012. It is hoped that this will help bring an end to the conflict in Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago. The importance of extensive consultation with civil society actors to ensure long-term buy-in from local stakeholders is a crucial lesson from the southern Philippines for other peace processes. This is especially critical in light of dangers of widespread lawlessness in the post-conflict era as government and non-state armed groups relinquish control on the ground.